or what I thought was really fun and cool was recognizing what glassware goes best with like the cocktail. And I think maybe that's like kind of what caught my eye and made me like really start to pay attention, because a cocktail doesn't look good in a certain glassware, or it's like, it doesn't really shine, right? It doesn't really appeal as well as you would like it to.
Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. So glad you're here. You know, I was in Seattle a couple of weeks back on business, and I went into this restaurant with my business partner, and I met a bartender there, but bartender does not do him justice. He is actually a professional mixologist, and we had such a great time. And you know, the cocktails were curated based on him asking us questions about what we liked and what our tastes were. And they were spectacular in presentation and flavor profile. And I suddenly realized, you know, this is a guest that I have to introduce on the podcast, because there is so much opportunity. If you have a bar, it is so profitable, and curating a specialty cocktail list is a huge competitive advantage. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Andy Rodriguez, professional mixologist, in this week's episode. So stay tuned. Thanks also to the sponsors this week: Works, Smithfield Culinary, Pop Menu, and Zinch. Now, on with the episode.
You're tuned in to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Powerful ideas to rock your restaurant. Here's your host, Roger Bodwin.
At Smithfield, they know that to meat lovers, a great serving of their favorite cut is so much more than just food. It's an experience, one that keeps them coming back to your operation again and again. They're committed to offering you the perfect protein for every dish at each day part. Turn to Smithfield for the most comprehensive portfolio of pork products, such as bacon, ham, sausage, and more, plus a variety of fully cooked beef and chicken. With Smithfield products, you can create delicious meals, from traditional menu items to globally inspired dishes, all designed to satisfy the insatiable appetites of your hungry carnivorous patrons. What's more, Smithfield does it responsibly, with full transparency and traceability from their farms to your kitchen. You can always be confident that when you partner with Smithfield, you'll serve what you love and your customers will love what you serve. Find your perfect protein with Smithfield. For more information or to order products, visit smithfieldculinary.com/Smithfield. Rockstars. Restaurants have been hit hard the last few years, which means restaurant owners and staff are working harder than ever. Trying to meet the demands of in-person hospitality can be really demanding, which is why I recommend Pop Menu Answering. Pop Menu Answering turns every phone call into an opportunity. It uses artificial intelligence to answer the simple questions that are tying up your phone lines, like, can I make a reservation? Or, where are you located? And over 50% of restaurant guests are happy to have their questions answered by an automated system. Within the Pop Menu platform, you can customize answers for your restaurant and choose the voice your guests hear, and even send follow-up links via text message. Pop Menu Answering picks up your phone 24/7, 365 days a year, allowing you and your team to focus on what matters most: pleasing your guests. Prevent lost customers and impress your guests with Pop Menu Answering. And for a limited time, my listeners can get $100 off their first month, plus lock in one unchanging monthly rate at popmenu.com/rockstars. Go now to get $100 off your first month and learn more about Pop Menu's full collection of tools at popmenu.com/rockstars. Rock on. Hey, welcome back. This is the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. Andy, thank you. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Roger.
Fantastic. Well, you know, you are like the bar guru, and I would consider you to be the master mixologist. And there's so much importance and just the creativity and everything that goes into a strong beverage program. And you're like totally at the heart of that. So I think it's so appropriate to our audience, because right now, you know, creating and curating a beautiful cocktail list, not just having a bar, but really putting all this amazing stuff forward is so important. And that's what you do. So I know we're going to get all into that.
Most definitely. And especially with creating cocktails, I can see us having a lengthy conversation about that. It's always fun to the process of doing that and whatnot.
So it's always interesting to our audience and to myself how people get into this hospitality business. Everyone's got their backstory and how it first struck them, either at a young age or as a young person, or even later in life. It comes to you at different times. Why don't you tell us your story?
Well, I think cocktails have always been somewhat associated. I think like growing up, your parents always have their cocktail of choice when it's dinner time, right? In my family, it was the Manhattan, so a very simple, classic cocktail. And so I learned a lot of that, and that's probably, to be honest, probably one of the first cocktails I learned because it's the family cocktail of choice during dinner. But I think the passion really built through just overall interest. You get a little bit of like, oh, okay, it's a drink here, a drink there, but then it turns into something different if you're mixing a few different flavors. And I think I didn't really fully appreciate that for a while, but finally, like once I actually got into the hospitality industry through New York and seeing more detail, like on how cocktails were created, how they came out looking, and how guests received them, was even more like kind of an awakening moment. And so I don't know how to really put it into words. It's hard to really describe how you like get into it, you know.
Well, it's
But it was
interesting
kind of
because you moved to New York City, and I'm kind of curious because,
mhm.
as I understand, you grew up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. So, what brought you to New York for the first? Because that's quite a move, right? And
Uh,
were you young at that time? Like, how young were you when you moved from Wyoming?
so I mean, from Wyoming, I actually moved from Wyoming to Seattle, Washington when I was 14.
Okay, first to Seattle. Yep,
And yeah, first to Seattle, and that's just because I had a lot of my mom's side of the family over here in Washington.
gotcha.
Um, and for New York, it was like more of okay, I just turned 20. When I was a little over 20. I was already visiting my family in Ohio, and just kind of was like I've been wanting to go to New York, and I've been saying it for like the past couple of years, and then all of a sudden, let's just go to New York. Let's just book a Greyhound and go to New York, find an Airbnb, and then we'll figure out rent from there.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I had the support of my both my father and my mother back here in Washington, saying, "I mean, might as well just go for it." Like
Chase your dream. Yeah.
exactly. So, and I wanted to go there for a couple different reasons. I was pursuing modeling at the time, so I was like, you know what, let's try my luck in New York. I mean, New York can be a very tough market, but it's a lively city, and I'm sure there's plenty of other things to do while I'm there. Moved there and figured, hey, I mean, hospitality is the best way to do it. So I went to New York, got a job at a couple different places, and and now we're here. But rent ended up catching up, so I moved back here to Washington. So,
So I think you were a bar back, right? A bar back and a server at a catering
and that
place. So did you get much exposure behind the bar as a bar back other than just in a support role? I mean, did they let you do anything besides, hey, fill the ice and, move us, bring us a couple cases of bar bottles and all that? That's a typical bar back thing.
yeah, and initially not so much just because I was still under 21.
I see.
And
Yep.
so for liability reasons, they didn't want me to handle too many spirits, at least free pouring or doing anything along those lines. Um, but there were a select few bartenders that I'd regularly work with. They'd be like, "Hey, actually help out two other people here." So I'd get here and there experience, not really as much as some might want right in the beginning, but for like catering, it was at least from the events that we hosted, it felt like there was such a big rush to where like when you go into a nightclub and you're trying to order a drink from a bar there. That's
Yes.
what I felt like a majority of the catering events that I worked were. They were that club type of scene,
Yeah.
even though it was just like family members or a wedding recital, a wedding reception, or whatever it was. Right, most of the people were zooming in and kind of going all in. So it was like, okay, make a few two-step drinks, rum and coke, vodka soda, easy stuff, not really anything elevated. Um, but yeah, most of my work was more support staff in that moment with little nibbits here and there, helping guests when it's those busy moments. And it wasn't more until at this Greek restaurant that I worked at that I actually started paying attention to more of the cocktails that the bartender there had put out. Um, and it's been so long that I couldn't even give you a name or anything along those lines. But he paid attention to everything. You know, he had his little tongs and everything that he would put like certain garnishes on with cocktails, and so he'd pay attention to those certain details and made sure what I thought was important or what I thought was really fun and cool was recognizing what glassware goes best with like the cocktail. And I think maybe that's like kind of what caught my eye and made me like really start to pay attention, because the cocktail doesn't look good in a certain glassware, or it's like it doesn't really shine, right? It doesn't really appeal as well as you would like it to.
You're
It's like
definitely
drinking wine
touching
out of
on,
a solo cup.
yeah, you're definitely touching on something super important. It's like the choice
Yeah.
of glassware accentuates the drink. It also brings out maybe the nuances, the flavors. Similar with wine,
Mhm.
right? There's a certain type of wine glass that goes with a white or red. And obviously a red wine
Exactly.
glass is big and bulbous to let all the, the
And it's
flavors
typically
out.
tapered at the front too, so you can get a nice nose.
Yeah.
To where white wine, it's wide open because there's not
Mhm.
really much of a nose for white wine. Yeah, so exactly. You don't
We
want
had a
to
similar
go ahead.
experience. So you obviously have so much more experience behind the bar. I was a bartender for a very short period of time. It was probably maybe a year. And,
Mhm.
it was at a private country club. And I was taught, just like you said, the one-step drinks. So if I made, a Singapore sling or a Bacardi cocktail, that was
Yeah,
elevated.
exactly.
And the members, right? It's like the guys would come in for lunch off the golf course, and the
Hmm.
drink of choice was something they called a skullbuster, which was 3 shots of Burnett's English gin with one little onion popped in it. And they would
Uh-huh.
have two of those things, and then they'd go hit the course again. It was like the thing, right?
Hmm.
And then on weekends there were weddings that were obviously it was a big wedding place. And now it's all about speed. It's not about style or flair. It's just pump them out as fast as you can because there's a line and there's
Exactly.
3 bartenders in a row and you're just cranking out drinks. So yes, that is, appropriate in certain situations, but
Hmm.
what's really important, like you're talking about, is the craftsmanship and the flair and the proper glassware and just curating something. So let's talk about your passion and
Yeah.
how that really developed and how you taught yourself all the stuff that you know now. And then we'll get into some of your other experiences at restaurants, but let's talk about how you developed the craft
Yeah.
personally.
Well, and like you just said, like those, simple 1-2 drinks, started off there. I mean, that was obvious there as well with like families. That's kind of a small experience too, because
Mhm.
your grandma's drink, right? You got 3 fingers with a splash of diet,
Yes.
and and you go from there, right?
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Uh, but and from there, once I started like really like playing around with that, then I stepped it up to. I really took it more as like a step by step. So like one steps everything is neat or a shot. 2-step, we got some type of mixer. Let's go to a 3-step. We've got a Negroni, maybe an old fashioned. And I really, that's what I kind of did, is I would buy just bottles of like mixers or additives and grab what I was drinking at the moment. So I was drinking whiskey and a lot of like cognacs when I first started like actually drinking, because I prefer my dark spirits over anything.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I started kind of just doing different cocktails. I was, okay, I've got a Boulevardier, I've got a Manhattan, I've got um, if you're wanting to get like a little more culinary with it, we start into like the Enzonis or like the winter Enzonis, where you muddle a little grape in there, and it just gives you like this kind of sweet acidic flavor with everything else. And I just started just grabbing different ingredients and started from there, like paper plane. And like that's one of my favorite cocktails. I think like that's a very popular modern cocktail too.
Can't say I've ever heard
Um,
of it. What's in it?
and it's going to be bourbon, so Aperol, some bitters,
Hmm.
and then you put like an Amaro in there, either like an Amaro, like Amaro Nonino, or if you're looking for like a little more of a bite, like an Amaro Montenegro is really nice. Or if you're just depending on how you like it, you can just have a different Amaro in there. But Amaro Montenegro is one of mine just because it gives it a little more like that bitey kind of bitter flavor that I
Gotcha.
enjoy.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you do a little bit of lemon juice and give it a shake and serve it up. done. And it's like a perfect balance with a little bit of sweeter like bourbon. So I'll use like a Buffalo Trace or something along those lines, right? Just because it's a sweeter, not so much of a pungent bourbon. And then I'll put all the other bittersweet, all that together. And it puts together, like once you shake it, the bitters and the lemon juice, they just put a nice froth on it. So you get a lot of that lemon herbal zest right on the nose as soon as you like sip the cocktail. So it's just a fun cocktail that requires a couple more ingredients. Oh,
who's your buddy? No, that's cool.
Walter.
Hey, Walter.
This is Walter. Come here.
Shop dog. Hey, Walter. Yeah. Awesome. Mascot.
He likes to say hello. So
oh, he's cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. No, he's totally welcome on the podcast. Yeah, keep him here.
Okay, you can hang on. You can hang.
Totally cool.
That's okay.
Awesome.
But so yeah, I'd pick up a couple bottles like that because that's 3-4 ingredients right off the bat, and that's how I kind of started building my little bar shelf to really play around with those type of ingredients. And I think that's really how I started to like evolve it. I think the next year I started playing more with different types of additives. So not just like Amaros or vermouths or anything along those lines, but like aperitifs. So like there's a fun brand that I think actually just recently went out of business, I think. But their name was Haas, and they're like a local California aperitif company that would use botanicals from their farm. And they would just pick out these different things. They had like a nice rosé spritz type of, it was just nice low ABV that really worked if you were trying to make like a spritz type cocktail, but then have like a different base. So I started playing around with like some rums or some like, I did throw a vermouth with a lemon citrus, one of their lemon citrus aperitifs to kind of brighten it up. So it turns like a sweet vermouth into like a slightly more like Lillet type of flavor. So you have that, still have that herbalness, but then it turns a little bit more floral and kind of sweet. So it's fun to kind of play around with those different flavors. And I've really kind of, from my personal palate, I like to try to contrast flavors and just keep them like savory, bitter, and then you have like a touch of sweetness at the end, or if it is sweet at the first, you're going to have like a very bitter ending in the back of your throat. That's just how I like to drink the cocktails, because whenever I'm enjoying a cocktail, no matter what I'm eating, I want it to have some type of either complement or contrast to the dish. I feel like that's just more the flavor aspect of it,
For restaurants, large costs can add up fast. Broken kitchen appliances, roof leaks, overhead costs during a slow season. But the traditional loan process is too slow. You need to learn about Zinch, a direct lender that makes financing fast, simple, and built around your needs. If you're generating over $10,000 in monthly revenue and you've been in business over 6 months, Zinch can fund up to $250,000 in less than 2 days. Just fill out a simple online application, provide copies of recent bank statements, and you can get an approval within 24 hours. See how much financing you can get with Zinch. Right now, Zinch is waiving application fees for my listeners. That's a $250 value. Go to financingthatworks.com. Once again, that's financingthatworks.com. Loans made or arranged pursuant to a California lender's law license. So that's a big part of what you do now, because you like to pair food with a proper cocktail and curate an experience for a guest. And there's so much value to that. That is part of what we would call an amazing dining experience, when someone is so knowledgeable that they not only recommend a food item, whether that be an appetizer, an entree, or dessert, but then they pair it with something that literally complements it, and someone tastes that after they got a recommendation, they decided to try the recommendation, and then when they love it, you just created a guest for life. You built value into their experience, and that's true hospitality, in my book. I mean, I love doing that.
It's honestly my favorite thing, and it's I don't think that's a feeling that I will ever not fully enjoy.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear a guest say,
and a compliment,
"Wow, great recommendation. Wow, great drink." And I'm honest with a lot of people. I tell them, I say, "Hey, like, be honest with me. I'm, if you don't like it for whatever reason, I won't know, and I can't fix it if you don't tell me." So be straightforward. I think we can
Cool.
all manage and be fine with it. I'm not gonna be,
Transparency. Well, that was my experience. I'm going to let the audience know now that I met you
yeah.
literally in Bellevue, Washington, when I was
Hmm.
visiting there just a couple weeks ago. And, my business partner and I walked into your restaurant because he knows you personally. And he's like, hey, we got to go meet this great guy, Andy, and he's a mixologist and blah, blah, blah. And I had no preconceived notions. And then we sat down, and then you immediately, like, irregardless of who I was with, it's like you treated us like we were the most important people in the place, even though you were treating everyone at your
Hmm.
bar that way. You were treating everyone like they were a regular or local. But then you were literally making drink choices saying, what do you like? And then
Hmm.
here you go. And then I took pictures of it, and I'm like, wow, these two cocktails look amazing. Like, you don't even want to take a sip of it before you pull out your phone and take a picture of it, because
Yeah,
it
exactly.
looked special, and you gave us this amazing experience. And that's really what it's all about. So thank you for doing that. And I'm really glad I
Of
met you,
course.
because now I want to share this passion that you have with our audience. And I want to talk about, the importance of a beverage program and the importance
Hmm.
of curating maybe specialty cocktails, not just having a bar if you have a bar and doing those one-step drinks, taking it a notch up or even
Hmm.
10 notches up and really delivering an experience, because that's really what it's all about.
It
Let's
it
Yeah, keep
is.
going. So let's
Well,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, it's okay, Roger.
All right. Nah, I'm tripping over my words here. So let's talk about some of your restaurant experiences after
Hmm.
you moved from, say, New York. Like, you left New York and then you went back to Seattle. You mentioned you had family there, and then you went to work for a large chain of restaurants, but one individual restaurant, I think it's called Joey. Was that your first experience back in Seattle, or did you work somewhere else first?
I worked somewhere else first. I actually when I came back from New York. As I had mentioned, rented started catching up, and like I said, moved back to Washington because it was the safer bet.
Yeah.
And I took a break from the hospitality industry and ended up actually working at kind of at a car dealership actually locally here
Mhm.
in Seattle. And I did that because I needed to find something quick, easy. That way, it's jumping from one state to another, and I have a decent transition.
Yeah. I
I
get that.
don't have to wait for the hiring dates and all of that. Ended up going a little bit longer in the car dealership than I wanted, but I was still doing some bartending on the side and still playing around with spirits and different cocktails at home, making them for friends, family. Even doing like if somebody was if a family member was having like a small little wine event or something like that, and bartend for them or create certain cocktails off of their whatever they have around the Manhattan.
Sure.
um, so I mean, it took me a minute, but and then I decided, like, I'm kind of tired of my commute. I know that there's a restaurant right down the street from where I'm living. Why don't I, go apply? I think it's about time to get back into it. I think it'd be a lot easier. At the time too, I was even getting into real estate for a little bit, and so I was like, this would be a good opportunity for me to network in a way. If I have time, I can communicate with my guests in a certain way. Uh, it was a lot busier at Joey than I anticipated it to be. So it wasn't the best place for networking because it's like who wants to say, "Hey, how's it going? You want to talk about real estate? Wait, I'll be right back." You know.
Gotcha. Yep.
So it wasn't the best, but it did turn into more of like focusing on the cocktails, and that's where I got to have more fun with that. Um, Play a little bit more with the inventory that they had there, and they had a little more access to certain things, um, or at least readily available things for like syrups and or like batch making things than I would as an individual, at least, you know, price wise. So I mean, it was fun to be able to mix in with a different type of spirits or to learn different things from guests that would come in from there, because I didn't really get as much of an opportunity to talk to guests about their drinks and certain experiences when I was in New York. Because I mean, I would talk to the guests, but I really never spoke with the guests or entertained with the guests. So this was probably my first one-on-one, more personal experience with the guests, I guess.
I was
Because before it was
impressed
more
with
Kate.
when I
Go
when
ahead.
I stopped in at Castillo. I mean, we walked around the downtown area of Bellevue, Washington. I had never been, and again, I had no idea what to expect, but it was very cosmopolitan, lots of skyscrapers, really up to the minute buildings, lots of new buildings going up, really dynamic, vibrant restaurant scene, all centered around this downtown area. And we went to several places after Castillo. And, it just struck me as a very upscale, sophisticated place where, the guests have an expectation of hospitality and they're looking for something more. And whether you have a restaurant in small town America or in the biggest cities in the world, it's like, it's not just delivering food and drink, it's delivering an experience.
Exactly.
And that's clearly what we got. No matter where we went, it was like you could tell that training was very, very important, and that the people were professionals wherever we went, whether that was their lifetime career or it was a stop on somewhere else. Clearly, the guest experience came first, and everyone was treated like a very important person, no matter where we went. And that was certainly the case where we saw
Agreed.
you. But yeah, it's like that was so important. So we talked a little bit about you doing private events and stuff. And now you've got your own home bar set up and you experiment down there and you have friends over and you do your thing for friends and family down in the home bar. You even sent me a video of that, which is really, really cool. And some photos, which I'm going to share with the audience, of some of your cocktails. Have you sort of built this database of your own concoctions that you've created now that's sort of a list of recipes and all that too?
I have, yeah. I've got a few just like random, just classics or twists off of classic cocktails that I've served to guests that they've either enjoyed or I've enjoyed. The video of my home bar kind of shows what my home shelf looks like, but there's something I didn't end up showing you. But my fridge is basically the entire door of my fridge is filled with like syrups and my vermouths that are open and all of that. So it looks like it's truly a full-on bar. It definitely, yeah. I'm gonna say yeah.
So it's so interesting because the liquor industry is so highly competitive, and there are so many vodkas and there are so many spirits of all kinds. And, when I owned restaurants, it's like the reps would come in the door all the time trying to get you to try this product and bring it in and all this kind of stuff. And some liquors are really super hot and popular and they just fly off the shelf and people, there's a buzz about them. And then other stuff will just sit there, and you don't need everything, but it's a real science and almost an art to figure out what do you absolutely need. And as for a while there, the big trend was like flavored vodkas, and you could get any kind of flavor from vanilla to raspberry to cinnamon to this, that, and the next thing. And that's sort of not cream. So trendy anymore, right? Is it? Or
no,
is it
not so much. I mean, you still have a lot of guests that will ask for flavored vodka shots or just like flavored, like some would say like frou-free drinks. I think it's gotten a little bit different to where people know that they can achieve a good flavor with a syrup rather than a flavored vodka.
I see.
Just because, I think great on Absolute. I feel like Absolute flavors are great, or there's even a few other smaller brands that have like good flavors to them. But like it also gives away a certain flavor that doesn't do well within other cocktails or with other ingredients. It gives it a different type of flavor profile. So I think, at least from what I've noticed and what I've seen within at least the Bellevue community, syrups are so easy to modify. You can make a simple syrup that's an easy 1-to-1 ratio of sugar and water, right? And you can throw a vanilla bean in there, and there's vanilla syrup. You can throw some tea bags if you have like a chamomile tea. You can throw a couple tea bags in the simple syrup, and then there's a chamomile infused simple syrup. And so there's a lot of things you can do with infusions, and there's even really cool ways of just rapid infusion to the liquors themselves, to where you don't even really need to play with that. And I think a lot of people want to see those infusions. I know behind the bar that I'm currently at, we have a couple different infusions as well as within our syrups as well, and 2 of our spirits. And sometimes some of our guests see us like making those together and like, what's that? Like, oh, this is actually our cocktail.
So that's part of the showmanship too, because you can display
hmm
something behind the bar. Guests can watch you making these things. It's intriguing to
hmm
watch. People want to try something new, right? So it's like a
hmm
marketing thing too, in addition to delivering a really cool product. So in terms of
Agreed.
infusions, is it
Mhm.
all just fruit or is it fruit and spice? Is it like what are some of the different infusions that you can do?
I mean, I think the more like classic ones that you would see are like the olor sacrums that people would make,
Mhm.
or just like the simple, more fruity, juicy, muddled flavors. I'd say more and more you're seeing a lot more like culinary cocktails, to where they're actually like working with the kitchen and using ingredients that the kitchen is already using. So like if you like a pretty popular cocktail that was it was come up was called like a yellow number two, which is like mezcal, a little yellow chartreuse, yellow bell pepper juice,
Mm. Mhm.
and it's basically like a build of a margarita with a little bit of like some twists, right? And the yellow pepper juice already acts sweet, so you because that's what the yellow pepper is. It's like the sweetest you can get out of the pepper, if I recall, right?
Yeah,
So you
right.
blend that down. It's already naturally sweet, but it's also very vegetal. So then it works with the mezcal, which is nice and smoky and earthy. And so as long as you can kind of accomplish that, like those flavors to combine, then it works. But I'm seeing a lot more and more culinary stuff for sure.
How popular are people drinking things neat now? Like there's so many different types of liquors that are sipping spirits, you might say, like
hmm
tequilas specifically. I don't know if it's per se the same for rums. You would obviously know best, but I mean, is that really popular still? I mean, not doing shots
hmm
because, party kids that go out to clubs and people do shots, but I'm talking about appreciating the nuances of a spirit for what it is and then comparing different tequilas. Try this one,
hmm
try that one. Do you develop sort of a palate for things where you can taste like wines very clearly, but like
hmm
tequilas or vodkas or any of the things that people sip? Does it
I
take time to really figure out the nuances or is it evident?
Um, it can. I think at least for like my specific palate, I definitely notice certain nuances about certain alcohols. And there definitely is like that market for like tequila and whiskey drinkers. I mean, they're the probably two popular like liquors of within the group of liquors that we can classify. Um, and I think tequila right now is ever more growing right now than whiskey, which which is good, honestly. And there's a lot of good tequilas out there. But I think like so, Alex, like for how I do it, say I go if I'm trying want to try like a new Scotch whiskey, or as of lately, it's been more rums and sherries for me. But if I want to try something new, I want to do it. I want to grab one single shot neat. I want ice on the side, and then if I don't have it on me, which I'll have like a little saline solution on me, so it's like a little bit of salt water essentially
Mhm.
in a little dropper bottle that I can drop in there. Or if I don't have that currently on me, or if the bar doesn't have any saline solution, I'll just ask for some simple table salt. And I'll do is I'll drink it neat and just have a little sip. Try it like that. Try it with all the alcohol and all the ethanol going in and everything. And I get that full burn if there is a burn. Taste that. I'll add a little bit on the ice. Let that chill down. Try it chilled with a little dilution. And then what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of the salt or saline and I'll put it on both, and I'll try them both that way. And that way I can try it. And it kind of follows that like the rule of tasting is like three sips before you like really say what you're tasting, because each sip your palate's getting a different note every time,
I
because you
see.
can't process all the flavors at once, right? You've got to
Right.
take that one
Yeah.
sip, you've got to figure it out, see, oh well, that one's got a little caramel, a little whatever in there. Take your second sip and like, oh, there's a little more floral notes or whatever along those lines. And that's how I generally like to do it. Most people don't do it like that. I'm just a little over the top about it, unfortunately. Well, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but I'm a little more over top than most people. But I do see some people asking for tequilas that would ask for like an extra añejo or just an añejo on the rocks, or even just like a reposado with a single ice cube. And then we're not talking like the gentleman's cube either, more just like a single little ice cube, just so it gets a little bit of dilution, but not like doesn't want it to be too cold. So,
While you're on that subject, for those people that, are not terribly familiar with tequilas, can you give us the difference between reposado and añejo and blanco tequilas? And it's not just the color per se. Is it part of the process? Is it the flavorings that go into it, the distillation? Like, what gives you the differences between those three types of tequila?
So it's the certain aging of the tequila itself.
Gotcha.
The blancos, and if I remember right, are basically straight out the still or up to like a year or two within an aging still, or within a barrel of some sort, but keeping it blanco. The reposado is going to be anywhere from like 2 to 3 years within a barrel, depending on the brand, depending on the tequila. Could be oak, it could be a rum, it could be a sherry cask. That's always actually fun to find something with a sherry cask, personally.
Right. That's awesome.
And then the añejo goes up from, if I recall, from like that 5 to 7 years. So depending on where you're going, and then you'll get more vanilla, more oaky, kind of those caramelized notes from the wood. So similar to like how you would age whiskey and scotch and other bourbons, it's along those same lines.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's all about the aging, which often determines price, right? And exclusivity and all these things. I mean, that's all part of marketing with liquor companies too. Yeah.
It can, because I know, so for like tequila and whiskey, it definitely does. But then for rums, it depends on the cask and where it's kind of from. Because you could have a really nice 15-year-old rum, but it's the fraction of a price of what a scotch or a tequila would be. And it's actually delicious, and you're like, I would buy that again and go into it. Right. So that's the kind of the perk about rums, is that they're affordable. And towards, no matter what the aging is. I think there's even like, there's a few like XO bottles that are like rum XO bottles that are under $150. Whereas if you were looking for, like, say, for example, the Don Julio 1942, right? It's one of the more popular, fast-going, everybody knows it, tequilas. For a bottle of that, you're paying $180 at least, and it's all right tequila. There are better tequilas, but it's a good tequila for the most part, right?
Restaurant owners and managers, listen, it's not too late to claim your employer retention credit, but you have to act soon. If you haven't heard of this, your business can receive money back from the IRS, money you've already paid in payroll taxes. Nothing you do today is more important. Now, this is free and clear cash that your business is owed by the government. The ERC program is available if your operation had 500 employees or less, you had to shut down or partially suspend your business, or you had at least a 20% decrease in business due to COVID-19 during any quarter of 2020 and the first 3 quarters of 2021. Now, your business can get up to $7,000 per employee per quarter for 21 and up to $5,000 per employee in 2020. Now, if you have just 10 employees today and meet the requirements, you can receive up to $260,000 back in a refundable tax credit that you don't have to pay back. Now, the faster you apply, the quicker you get the money, but you must do it soon. You can use the money for any purpose: payroll, cost of goods, business improvement, or other expenses. Again, you don't have to pay this money back. Now, Works is a company that will do everything for you to get the money that you're owed. Now, I'm speaking from experience with Works. My restaurant received big checks in all available quarters, and Works people and process made it easy. For a no-obligation consultation, click the link in the show notes to this episode and speak to them with no obligation. You pay nothing until they get you the cash. Act now. Let's talk about beverage programs for a bar out there that wants to elevate their program. And I would say there's 2 ways to go. and you can probably add to this, but the first step, I think, if I was starting a new restaurant or just up-leveling my bar, would be to create a specialty cocktail list. That would be the first thing. And then you've already mentioned maybe the next step would be then starting to curate or pair things with the food. Can you give operators some specific advice on where they would start to put together a specialty cocktail list that might stand apart from someone else's cocktail list, but isn't too difficult to execute, just to get your feet wet and to start moving into a program?
Yeah. I'd say first thing is what's your restaurant's theme? I think that's the big part. If you have a cocktail list that makes no sense or that doesn't cater to the theme of your restaurant,
sure,
it makes it hard to connect with the guest, and it doesn't sound as attractive to the guests when they're drinking. So it depends on there. For an example, the restaurant I'm at is a tapas restaurant, so I know that it's going to be more Spaniard ingredients. More Spaniards prefer drier, more savory flavors, which works out for me because that's my flavor profile. But at the same time, I also have to realize that not everybody is me. So I need to make sure I adjust those flavors to they aren't as dry, or they have a little more sweetness towards it to where it can appeal to the mass, right? And even, for example, right now, we are updating into our spring-summer menu, and I'm playing with squid ink, right? So I'm incorporating squid ink within the actual simple.
That is so interesting. That's unusual, but interesting.
It's unusual, but it's actually really good. Right? So what I ended up doing is I infused the squid ink within the simple syrup itself to where it'll be sweet and savory, because squid ink, if you don't know, it provides that umami type of savory flavor. Can be a little fishy if you have a little too much of it, but it coats everything and just turns it black. And so what I've done is I put a little squid ink with simple syrup.
Yeah.
And I've basically made a riff on a Paloma, right? So a little grapefruit juice, tequila, lime juice, and then top it off with either squirt, which is the way you should do it, or Sprite if you don't have squirt. And what I did instead is I put mezcal in there, so it gives it a little smoky earthiness. I've got the squid ink in there, the grapefruit juice, and everything turns black, and then a little Campari to bring out those grapefruit flavors. Because you've got for Campari specifically, you have more grapefruit flavors than you do like orangey flavors. Say like Aperol is going to be more sweeter, and you get more bitter orange rather than bitter tart grapefruit. You do that, and it just all comes together, and it comes out this beautiful kind of like hazy black, almost as if it was like a dark kind of cloud covered in front of you.
Right.
And and from there, you take a sip, and you're not really expecting this kind of refreshing, like fruity flavor, but you get a little bit of like this grapefruit. You get the bitterness from the Campari, and then the way I like to describe it is it's like you toasted when you eat for breakfast, you cut a grapefruit in half.
I love grapefruit. Yeah.
You cut it in half, you toasted it, and you sprinkled a little salt on top, and that's how I describe it. It's a little smoked grapefruit for breakfast is probably the best way I would describe it.
Well, still, it's okay. So the flavors sound amazing. That sounds like something I wish I tried when I was behind your bar. But then the color itself, it's going to catch people's attention. So now it's not just the flavors of the drink you're making. It's like you want to turn people on to new experiences. And anyone within eyesight of what you're making sees this drink, and it looks so unlike anything I've seen before, or most people, and then instantly it's, what's that? I want to try that, So it almost sells itself. And I remember when I was a bartender, the old school stuff that kind of colored drinks was like grenadine and blue curacao, right?
Exactly.
And you could turn something like, Mediterranean blue just by putting a splash of curacao in there. But now there's so many other things that people do, and that's part of the flair. Do you remember, I'm sure you've seen this, maybe you're even young to remember it, but there was a Tom Cruise movie called Cocktail a long time ago. It was like an 80s movie, right? And it was all about that, trick bartending where they're like,
Mm-hmm.
pouring shots behind their back into shakers, and they're throwing ice at each other and they're mixing stuff up. And it was all about the presentation and the flair. And I think Tom Cruise ended up owning his own bar at the end of that movie, right? Because it turned into a huge career for him.
Well, and yeah, if I recall, that's pretty accurate. That he actually worked along with bartenders as well, and then ended up getting his own bar.
Exactly.
But there's been many a times that I've had that reference to me.
Oh,
and I've got to
That's you.
I've got to do a
guy.
freestyle of me shaking things up like he would,
right?
And then do a little like, oh, here goes behind the back.
That's
and
the show.
Exactly.
So you do a little of that sometimes, right? Do you still do some of that stuff just to like turn on the guests? Like entertain them, because it is entertainment after all.
It is. One of my more common things that I like to do when I'm actually like bartending, I actually will put the smaller tin. I'll put ice in the large tin, put the smaller tin on top of it, put all the liquid in it, and then I'll flip the smaller tin in while all the liquid's in there.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's just keeping, centrifugal force, right, to keep the liquid in there.
Yeah,
but
right.
I'll do that, and some guests just like, wait, they'll be a little more like, oh, okay, got it. And then I'll kind of do like a long like strain to where the liquid goes into the ice and give it a nice shake, and then there's your cocktail. But occasionally you'll see me doing that. I don't do as much with this bar, but I used to at Joey throw a lot more bottles around.
Yeah.
Right. We had basically a pyramid, right?
Yeah.
And on one side there was the well, and then there'd be like other bottles that I would need to get to. So I would reach across the well because I was a lot taller and my arms are a lot longer, and I'd grab the top of the bottle and I'd toss it up and over to me.
Nice.
And so some guests at the bar top would see that and they'd be like, "Whoa!" Like they'd be frightened because they were afraid the bottle's going to drop down and shatter and make a huge mess. You're in complete
control, though.
Yeah, I mean, there was only a couple of times it knocked a couple bottles off. Only a couple. Nothing
most of the time.
Though.
Most of the time it worked.
9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was fun.
Let's talk about the next step. Okay, so let's just say, all right, the first step for a bartender or someone, that owns a bar or restaurant creates a specialty cocktail program. How difficult is it to start pairing things with food? Like, it takes some expertise, doesn't it? It's an experiment, or you work with someone like yourself who's an expert that can literally curate the list and help you work with a menu. And okay, I want to pair so many cocktails with certain food items and then present that as an experience to the guests. It's a challenging thing, isn't it? If you don't really
know what to do. Especially if you're not sure on like what your like what route you're really wanting to go. Are you wanting cocktails that really pair well in like a contrasting way, or are you wanting them to be something complementary to where like how people would say white wine with fish, right?
Okay. Yeah, of course.
Similar to that type of deal. I like a red wine with fish personally because I like that contrast. So what I like to do is I like to get together with the chef and then either one or two other people, and I say, what are some popular items that we are selling right now, and what are some things that we can do to like really kind of highlight that item more, but towards the drink. And so, for instance, like what we're calling our Paloma Negra is we have a squid ink paella, we have a squid ink a calamari un tinta, which is going to be sauteed calamari within squid ink and seafood broth over coconut rice.
That sounds awesome.
Like those savory, we want to highlight and just have some squid ink item to give that savory type of note, right? So using that as an example, that would be the best way. So what I'll do is I'll ask them, okay, are these items selling well? We like these. We see a lot of these people. A lot of our guests actually posting like our squid ink on their Instagrams or wherever, right? So then let's play around with it. Let's test it. And then I'll make 1 or 2 variations. We'll have something on the side with like a little squid ink on there, and we'll taste it. We'll take a sip. We'll eat some. We'll just kind of play around with it and see how it looks how the cocktail not only looks next to the food, but also tastes next to the food. Like if you, I wouldn't recommend dumping your food within your cocktail, but I mean, we want to try to make it as close to that as possible, you know? So I think what I would recommend for sure is get 2 or 3 people that work within the same area or have the same type of responsibilities, because also doing it by yourself allows a lot more of kind of like a one-sided opinion of everything too. You want to make sure everybody likes it that has different flavors than just you. So like for me, I know that the chef and I have very similar taste palettes to where we like drier, more savory things. But I know a couple of our other management team members, they prefer the sweeter, the less dry and the less floral, but they like that fruity type of drinks or those sweeter type of dishes, maybe even like spicy instead of savory. So working with them and having that contrast in taste and flavor helps you work together to kind of meet into a nice middle ground.
Very cool. That's awesome. So this is sort of you've been a mixologist for quite some time, and I'm sure you've seen so many different trends come and go. So I'm curious how long trends generally last, and then what's currently trending now. Like, are people, you know what I mean? Like, people jump on sort of the bandwagon and like, it's cool to be drinking this for the moment, but then it shifts to something else. And that trend could go across the country, you know? Like, what's trending and how long do these trends last? I mean, does anything really have legs and staying power where it's always popular? Like you mentioned Manhattans, that is the most classic of all Frank Sinatra type cocktails, right? And people will still order that today, but I wouldn't say it's trendy per se, right?
No, that's like a very classic, just kind of, you want something very simple. You know what you're going to get. It's straightforward, you know? I mean, even if you don't know the story too behind it, Manhattan is simply the area code of Manhattan. So it's 212, you know, and that's literally 2 ounces bourbon, 1 ounce vermouth, 2 dashes of bitters. Done. You've got your Manhattan. But as far as like other trends, I think it's definitely, it depends on what area you're in.
So it's different,
I'd say
on different parts of the country have different trends.
Exactly. Yeah. Like here in Washington, I think I see more and more tequila and just like whiskey drinkers than anything, as well as like more wine drinkers. You want, because Washington's got a great wine scene right now. Well, has had a great wine scene in general. But I know in Portland, like there's a big scene for sherry down in Portland, actually. There's a pretty decent bar that has like over 120 different sherries down there. So, I mean, it depends on like where you're going. I think it really does depend on what you're looking for and what area you're in. But I'd say from what I've seen and just kind of read up on, it's still just that tequila. Those tequila drinks are really kind of coming up. What is it? I think I read something that tequila is becoming more of a preferred spirit than like vodka sodas, just because it's less calories in the long run of everything, or less sugar. And I'm not drinking 2-step drinks like that though either.
Sure, of course.
And I actually can't drink tequila too. I'm actually allergic.
Okay,
so
well, that's too bad for you, because I love it.
I know, because there's great tequilas out there too.
Right,
I can give it a little taste. It is what it is.
Hey, let's go back to sherry for a second. Sherry in my mind is, again, one of those older classic drinks that may have been like an after dinner type drink, right? Back in the 50s maybe, or the 60s, and now it's sort of made a resurgence, and now people are drinking it anytime. It's not necessarily an after drink. I mean, I think the term used to be like aperitif or digestif, and it's like it was sort of a trend. You would have dinner, you might have wine with dinner or a cocktail with dinner, and then you would have sort of an after dinner drink that was a series of different things that you could have. And
exactly,
is sherry a wine-based thing like a port, or is it different? What is sherry exactly?
It is similar to a port in a way. It's a fortified wine to where they take the fermented product already that they're going to turn into wine, and they do a second distillation. So it makes it last a lot longer. It can bump up the ABV of it depending on what you're doing and how long you're making it. But people aren't as familiar with sherries anymore. I mean, most people, when you hear sherry, you think cooking sherry.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so,
Yes,
like,
that's
if
true.
people, yeah. And so, like,
Cooking with that sort of thing.
exactly. And so there's like red wine vinegar sherry or something like that, red sherry. There's all kinds of different cooking sherries. And so if you ever ask somebody like, "Hey, have you ever had sherry?" Most people's faces are like, "Why would you drink that? Like that's disgusting. That's not what you're supposed to do." And then you go into it a little bit more, and you're like, "No, from Spain, it's got a little bit different." So I play with sherry in a way to where if I'm drinking sherry, I pair it throughout the whole meal, and I start off with my more drier, less sweet, and less more floral type of sherry. So like a mentilla, or I said that wrong. A manzanilla.
There you go.
I need to
That's the
say that right. There we go.
pronunciation.
That's the right. That's
Right.
right.
Gotcha.
And then or a fino sherry, which are typically like they look like white wines, and they're more floral, but they're extremely like savory, and you get a lot of that maritime flavor out of that. So it's great for like appetizers. If you're eating olives, if you're eating even just like a little bit of cheese, it's like the perfect little pairing with it, right? And then you move into like your dry, still in the dry selection, but have a little more age on them. So like an Amontillado or a Oloroso sherry, those have a little bit more barrel life in them. So they have a little more almond and some nutty flavors. And those are great to have with like your savory meats. So like even like just pork, or if you get a little jamon, so like a little cured meat like that. So I try to enjoy the sherry throughout the whole meal and make it more of a simple pairing rather than I'm going to enjoy my cocktail throughout my entire meal.
Awesome.
So, and then there are places that we offer a flight of either for a flight of vermouth or a flight of sherry, and depending on how you like it, and either way is a good way. Because in Spain, you're either drinking wine products such as like just regular red wine as we know it, your sherry, or vermouth. So that's going to be a lot sweeter and a lot more bitter and herbal than most would be. And you can still have a lot of fun with those like dry vermouths and sweet vermouths in the same way that you can have it with your drier and sweeter sherries. So there's a lot to do with it. Or if you can big cocktails like a Calimoco or a Rebejito, or those are both red wine. Like it's a red wine and Coke with a little bit of mint is a Calimoco, and so you get that like bitterness from the red wine, and then you get the sweetness from the Coke with a little refreshing mint, and so it's a nice kind of combination of flavors: bitter, sweet, refreshing, right? And then a Rebejito is fino sherry, so one of the drier sherries, Sprite and mint, and you get this that maritime saltiness, that umami flavor.
Yeah,
pairs so good with the sweet Sprite and a little bit of refreshing mint. And you're like, this is just not what you would expect from most people or most things to drink.
that's amazing. You've shared so much of the creativity and the professionalism and your expertise and your passion for spirits and cocktails. You also do a little bit of consulting on the side, will help other restaurants or bars develop certain programs. Can people reach out to you at Instagram, and how can they reach you? I'm going to put it also into the show notes so that if someone's interested, they can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely consult in either, menu creations or drink creations. And people can reach out to me through Instagram currently at Andrew_A_Rodriguez. and you can just send me a DM and I can look it over and see what we're working with and communicate further there. But I'm always excited to help out with people and see what we're working with or seeing what they want to bring to their menu. I think it's a fun experience, and it gets, especially if your menu is a little bit older, it gets your team excited too, because you're like, oh, cool, new things to build, and if they have that passion, it allows them to build. So I'm definitely open for people to reach out for me there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing that knowledge and passion, enthusiasm that you have for great cocktails. And again, I so enjoyed my experience meeting you face to face, having you curate some really cool custom crafted cocktails for us and that whole experience. So I'm glad we met, and I had to share this because I mean, it's so important right now, not just to deliver amazing food, but to pair it with amazing beverages and just to deliver experiences. And that's clearly what you're into doing. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, of course. It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, Roger.
Well, thanks to our audience for tuning in. Thank you to our sponsors. I hope everyone stays well. That was the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. We can't wait to see you in the next episode, so please stay tuned. Andy, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. I count you as a new friend, and you introduced me to a whole world of bar and curating cocktails and all the specialty knowledge that goes with it. And I'm a fan, so thanks for being with us. Thanks also to our sponsors. And I wanted to tell our audience a little bit about the Restaurant Rockstars Academy. You know, the Academy is for you if you're starting your very first restaurant, or you just want to maximize your opportunities and the profits in an existing restaurant. It's at an absolute value price, monthly at $59, and it includes a series of systems that'll help you run a stronger, more profitable operation. So be free to check that out at restaurantrockstars.com. And I can't wait to see you in the next episode.
People go to restaurants for lots of reasons. For fun, celebration, for family, for lifestyle. What the customer doesn't know is the thousands of details it takes to run a great restaurant. This is a high-risk, high-fail business. It's hard to find great staff. Costs are rising and profits are disappearing. It's a treacherous road, and smart operators need a professional guide. I'm Roger. I've started many highly successful, high-profit restaurants that I've now sold for millions of dollars. I'm passionate about helping other owners and managers not just succeed, but knock it out of the park. I created a game-changing system, and it's filled with everything I've learned in over 20 years running super profitable, super fun restaurants. Everything from creating high-profit menu items and cost controls to staff training where your teams serve and sell, to marketing hooks, money-maximizing tips, and efficiencies across your operation. What does this mean to you? More money to invest in your restaurant, to hire a management team, time freedom, and peace of mind. You don't just want to run a restaurant. You want to dominate your competition and create a lasting legacy. Join the Academy, and I'll show you how it's done.
Thanks for listening to the Restaurant Rockstars Podcast. For lots of great resources, head over to restaurantrockstars.com. See you next time.